The Platform, a Spanish movie from 2019 but released on Netflix in 2020. It's quite interesting. It's essentially a stage play because it's really just a small number of characters talking to each other in one room, essentially. It's clearly inspired by Cube, which is essentially one room and about five characters talking to each other. These type of movies really benefit if the characters actually talk to each other. These type of movies with essentially one location and only a few characters can really drag and be very hard going if they try to get super cinematic. What I mean by super cinematic, it's a thing where they believe that true cinema is essentially not dialogue driven. The general opinion is that cinema at its best is when characters don't talk and it's just all visuals. Hence, you get movies by Nicholas Winding Refn where the lead character says about 40 lines of dialogue in total through the 90-minute movie. So all I'm saying is, when it's one location and about five characters, these characters really need to talk to each other and have proper backwards and forwards conversation and monologues, and they need to talk. If these characters do not talk, it will be very hard going and pretty boring. And in this movie, they do talk to each other. You can pick apart the logic of the world it depicts. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Why do the people outside the tower not know what's going on inside the tower when people get released from the tower, which apparently happens? Why do those people not then tell the public, this is what happened in the tower when I was in it for 6 months? So you can pick apart the logic of the world. I think it's pointless doing so. It doesn't make much sense. There's not a lot of logic to it. The story really is basically one big metaphor. Do the makers themselves know what the metaphor actually is? Probably not. I suspect it's one of those cases of, hey, it's political, or that's about as far as it goes. It reminds me of the British sitcom Bad Education. It has a theme tune, and one of the lyrics of the theme tune is, yeah, politics, and then it just stops, no more words. And it's kind of, like, yeah, politics. I've said politics, but I don't actually know anything more than that. That's as much as my thinking goes. So the whole story kind of works more as some kind of general metaphor about society, about the people on the top stealing or taking too much and leaving too little for those underneath. And the further down people go, they end up with nothing. So the people at the top get everything and live a comfortable life, and the people down below get nothing. The poor distribution of wealth and stuff. That's kind of, the story is one big metaphor, and that's about all there is to say on that. The movie depicts food, very high-end, classy, restaurant quality food, and it presents it as being disgusting, and it starts to rot, and people are walking on the food, and it gets, there's all this glass and stuff kind of gets crushed in amongst the food, and it depicts this high quality restaurant food as being quite disgusting. Maybe not initially, but by the time it gets a few levels down, it becomes quite disgusting. So that's very reminiscent of The Cook, The Thief, His Wife and Her Lover, the 1989 Peter Greenaway movie, which is a very interesting, although rather difficult to watch movie. It shows restaurant quality, high-end food, and it rotting, and it's presented as being quite disgusting, I think. This movie, anyway, its depiction of food is very similar to that Peter Greenaway movie. It's obviously also reminiscent of Cube, and I also get a slight hint of Sail, the 1975 movie. So to me, it's very much it's like Cube, Sail, and the cook, the thief, his wife, and her lover all mixed together. And let's be honest, that's an interesting sounding combination, I think. Those are three interesting, unusual movies, and it's an interesting combination of the three. It's an interesting movie. As I say, logic doesn't quite add up. I think the ending is quite poor. This is a minor spoiler, but I think the ending doesn't mean much. The makers sort of present it as meaning something, but I don't think it means half as much as the makers think it means. I found the message at the end to be silly and meaningless. I don't think the ending was very good. It did not mean as much as the makers thought it meant. And the message they were sending back to the people at the top of the tower controlling it was vague or non-existent. So I thought the ending was a wee bit disappointing. There is a lot to like about it. It held my attention. It was enjoyable. It was mildly thought-provoking. It's an interesting concept. It just suffers from a poor ending. Logic could have been better. The world could have been better worked out, and also just logic of individual scenes, like the lead character gets saved very conveniently, just at the precise moment when he needed to be saved by another character. You know, that's not in my opinion, an example of brilliant writing. But at least in this sort of stage play style movie, the characters talked to each other extensively. I would say mostly the dialogue was quite interesting. There was some worthwhile dialogue and interesting things were said backwards and forwards. There wasn't too much meandering in the dialogue. The dialogue moved the story forward and was interesting in and of itself. It definitely had its deficiencies, but if you like those three previous movies I've mentioned, this movie should basically work for you. It was an interesting, worthwhile movie. I'm glad I saw it. Anyway, if you don't mind logic issues, the movie's fine. If you do mind logic issues, the movie might actually actively annoy you. This movie I'm giving 6 out of 10. Above average. It's an interesting movie. It's worth watching. It's not a masterpiece. It's not perfect, but it's interesting and certainly worth 80 or 90 minutes of your time. I enjoyed it for the most part.